December 1941 did not begin with war drums. It began with silence. A silence spreading from Washington to Tokyo, from the oil fields of Indonesia, to the Pacific seas where battleships waited under calm skies. But beneath that silence, a crisis was tightening like a noose around Japan's neck. Before World War II fully engulfed the world, Japan had built an empire across East Asia. Factories, ships, aircraft, everything depended on one thing: oil. And 80% of that oil came from the United States. When Japan invaded French Indochina in 1940, America responded with something far more dangerous than bombs: an oil embargo. Overnight, Japan's fuel lifeline was cut. The empire had less than 2 years of oil left, barely enough to run its navy, its factories, or its war machine. Admirals warned the emperor, "Without oil, Japan will die without fighting." American officials believed the embargo would force Japan back to diplomacy. But inside military councils in Tokyo, the message was interpreted differently, not as pressure, but as a countdown to collapse. Japan now faced an impossible choice: accept American demands and shrink the empire, or seize new oil fields in Southeast Asia. There was only one thing standing in their way: the United States Pacific Fleet anchored at Pearl Harbor. By mid-1941, Japanese intelligence reported that the U.S. Navy could interfere with any Japanese expansion toward the Dutch East Indies, the region rich with the very resource Japan needed to survive. If Japan moved south, America would respond. If Japan did nothing, the empire's engines would run dry. This was not a question of pride, not revenge, not honor. It was simple mathematics: oil or extinction. In Tokyo, Prime Minister Hideki Tojo declared, "A nation that has lost its fuel cannot defend its existence." While diplomats continued peace talks in Washington, Japan's military began preparing a different plan, one they believed could buy them 6 months of freedom. 6 months to grab oil fields, 6 months to fortify the Pacific, 6 months before America inevitably struck back. Japan's strategy was brutal and calculated: cripple the United States Pacific Fleet in one decisive blow, and move south before American industry awakened. Commander Minoru Genda described the logic plainly: if war is unavoidable, then striking first is our only chance. Training intensified in remote Japanese bays. Pilots practiced torpedo runs in shallow waters designed to mimic Pearl Harbor. Naval officers studied American ship positions, predicted weather patterns, and mapped routes across the northern Pacific where storms could hide an entire fleet. What the world did not know was this: Japan never expected to defeat the United States in a long war, but it believed it could delay America long enough to secure oil fields and negotiate peace from a position of strength. As November 1941 drew to a close, the crisis reached its breaking point. Japanese leaders gathered in Tokyo for what would later be called one of the most fateful meetings in modern history. The room was divided between two visions: peace that meant surrender, or war that promised only temporary survival. Foreign Minister Shigenori Togo pleaded for diplomacy, warning that attacking the United States would ignite a conflict Japan could never win. But generals and admirals brought charts, fuel logs, and hard numbers. Japan's oil reserves were shrinking fast. Every ship that sailed, every bomber that trained, every factory that operated was draining the empire's future. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the architect of Japan's naval strategy, delivered the blunt truth: if the United States cuts all oil, our navy will not last 2 years. After that, we cannot fight at all. The American embargo was working exactly as Washington intended, slowly suffocating Japan's ability to wage war. But to Japanese leaders, it felt like a silent weapon aimed at the nation's heart. Peace negotiations continued in Washington, but they were collapsing. The United States demanded Japan withdraw from China. Japan refused. Japan asked the U.S. to restore oil shipments. America refused. Both sides believed they were negotiating from moral ground, but neither side realized the clock was already ticking toward war. Inside the Japanese naval headquarters, a different operation was already in motion. Admiral Yamamoto had approved an audacious plan: a surprise strike intended to disable the U.S. Pacific Fleet for at least 6 months. Japan didn't need victory, it needed time. To seize the oil fields in the Dutch East Indies, Japan had to ensure that American battleships and aircraft carriers could not interfere. The plan was built on speed, secrecy, and luck. The attack force, 6 carriers, 400 aircraft, destroyers, submarines gathered in the Kuril Islands, hidden beneath winter storms. The fleet carried enough fuel for a one-way mission. If discovered, they would be destroyed before reaching Hawaii. Every officer aboard understood this risk. War diaries from the carriers reveal a chilling mixture of fear and duty. Pilot Saburo Shindo wrote, "We fly not for glory, but because our country is out of time." Meanwhile, in Hawaii, life moved peacefully. Soldiers played baseball. Families attended Sunday church. The Pacific Fleet believed Japan might strike somewhere, but not 4,000 miles across open ocean. American intelligence intercepted coded Japanese messages, but none clearly revealed the target. The puzzle pieces were there, but scattered. A few analysts warned Hawaii was vulnerable, yet their voices were dismissed as speculation. On November 26th, Japan's strike fleet left Hidokapu Bay under radio silence. No messages, no signals, only icy winds and the endless northern Pacific around them. For 12 days, the Armada slipped through. As Japan advanced across Southeast Asia, its victories came at incredible speed. Malaya, Hong Kong, Guam, Wake Island, the Philippines. In Tokyo, these early successes were celebrated as proof that Japan had chosen the right path. But beneath the surface, leaders knew the truth. The empire was racing against time. Every ship burned oil, and every mile gained brought them closer to running out of it. Japan's high command understood one thing. If they could not secure enough fuel, the empire would collapse long before. America's military strength reached full force. The Dutch East Indies, modern-day Indonesia, held more than 60% of Asia's oil. To Japan, it wasn't just a target. It was survival itself. But capturing territory was only half the battle. Keeping it was nearly impossible. By mid-1942, America recovered from Pearl Harbor faster than Japan expected. New ships rolled out of American shipyards every month. Aircraft production quadrupled. While Japan struggled to replace a single carrier, the United States was launching entire fleets. This imbalance marked the beginning of Japan's nightmare. The Battle of Midway became the turning point. Japan lost 4 elite aircraft carriers, ships that could never be replaced. It was more than a military defeat. It shattered the illusion of invincibility that Japan's leaders had promised their people. After Midway, every Japanese soldier, sailor, and pilot was fighting a war the empire no longer had the resources to win. Still, Japan refused to surrender. Cultural beliefs, military pride, and fear of humiliation pushed the nation deeper into a war of desperation. Across the Pacific, island after island turned into brutal battlegrounds. Guadalcanal, Saipan, Iwo Jima, Okinawa, names that would echo through history. Japanese troops fought with unbelievable determination, often without food, ammunition, or hope of reinforcement. What drove them was not just loyalty to the emperor, it was the belief that survival of the entire nation depended on their resistance. As the war dragged on, Japan's fuel reserves dropped to critical levels. By 1945, most of the Navy could no longer sail. Many ships were anchored permanently because there simply wasn't enough oil to move them. Fighter pilots trained without fuel, practicing maneuvers on bicycles drawn in dirt fields. While America grew stronger, Japan grew weaker. In the final months, the empire faced an impossible truth. The war it had chosen for survival was now the very thing ensuring its destruction. Cities burned, millions suffered, and Japan stood on the edge of collapse, the very fate its leaders once feared more than war itself. Part 4 would reveal the final chapter. How Japan's last hopes faded, why surrender became inevitable, and how one decision transformed the world forever. By early 1945, Japan stood on the brink of total collapse. The empire that once stretched across the Pacific was shrinking month by month. American submarines had cut off supply lines, leaving Japanese cities without food, factories without resources, and soldiers without ammunition. The very lifeline Japan went to war for, oil, had nearly vanished. Most of the Navy was trapped in port, unable to fight or flee. Japan's leaders knew they could no longer win, but surrender still felt unthinkable. Generations had been raised to believe that dying for the emperor was more honorable than laying down arms. As defeat became certain, Japan prepared for a final, desperate defense of the homeland. Plans were drawn for civilians. including women and children, to fight with bamboo spears if the Americans invaded. Across the Pacific, the cost of the war was rising. Battles like Iwo Jima and Okinawa revealed the unimaginable human price of pushing closer to Japan's home islands. Thousands died on both sides. American commanders understood that a full-scale invasion could cost more than 1 million lives, and they searched for another way to end the war. Then came a turning point no one expected. In the summer of 1945, the United States unveiled a weapon unlike anything the world had ever seen: the atomic bomb. Built in secrecy, created by the brightest scientists, it carried a destructive power beyond imagination. On August 6, the bomb fell on Hiroshima. In seconds, an entire city vanished into fire. 3 days later, Nagasaki suffered the same fate. The shock was immediate. For Japan's government, the truth was unavoidable. The war was lost. Continuing to fight would mean the extinction of the nation they had sworn to protect. The emperor, long considered a divine figure, made a historic decision. He chose surrender, breaking centuries of tradition, to save what remained of his people. On August 15, 1945, Japan announced its surrender to the world. For the first time, millions heard the emperor's voice as he spoke on radio, urging the nation to endure the unbearable and accept peace. The guns fell silent. The war that began as a struggle for resources ended with a moment that rewrote human history. In the years that followed, Japan rebuilt from ruins. Cities rose from ashes, democracy replaced militarism, and a devastated nation transformed into one of the world's leading economies. But the memory of the war and the decision to attack for survival remained a defining chapter of Japan's identity. The story of why Japan chose war is a reminder of how nations can be driven not only by ambition but by fear, and how the pursuit of survival under the wrong leadership can lead to unimaginable destruction.